Test, test.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Okay. Okay, now we're going to start. So we're doing the fossil record. Last week we talked about the flood, how the flood was actually what created the fossils. So the fossil record actually confirms the flood about 4,500 years ago. And we're going to get through a lot today. Okay, in 2 Corinthians it says, we demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. And that's what we're doing in this whole series. Okay, because evolution in millions of years has set itself up against God. So today we're going to talk about what the fossil record actually shows, how fossils are formed, how old the fossils are, all the fraudulent fossils out there, and then if we have time, we're going to talk about radiometric dating. Okay, so what does the fossil record actually show? Two things you need to keep in mind, and all the secular scientists and evolutionists also believe this. This is what they have come up with. Sudden appearance of all the organism and what's called stasis, which is just everything is created kinds, is what stasis means. It stays the same. Those two things, sudden appearance and stasis. That is what the fossil record shows. Okay? So the Darwinian theory, evolution millions of years, here's time, and then phyla, these are just all the groups of animals. Everything starts at a tiny little point. One single-celled organism somehow created itself. We'll talk about that next week. And it became everything. All plants, all animals, every single thing. It became, that one little cell became all of that. That is what the Darwinian theory means, it says. The fossil record actually shows this. Okay? It shows all the different kinds of things. Plants, animals, all the different kinds. This is what the fossil record shows. So in science, you make a theory to predict something, you test it, you observe it. If the evidence doesn't support your theory, you change your theory. Okay? They never do that. They never change their theory. Their theory has remained the same because it's a theory that excludes God, creation, and the flood. Remember, those two things they're trying to get rid of. And that's what their theory is trying to get rid of. They will not change their theory, even though the evidence clearly shows that that is not the case. Okay? The fossil record does not show a continuous gradual evolution, but rather an abrupt and sudden emergence of new life forms. Okay? Everybody acknowledges this. Okay, so keep in mind when we're talking about these fossils, the theory of evolution should show the tree of life that everybody is shown their whole life from kindergarten on. They're shown that tree of life, but this is the evidence. Okay, the picture on the right is the evidence. Okay, that is super important to know. The fossil record does not in any way support evolution. Okay, lots of people will say, well, the fossil record shows millions of years in evolution. It absolutely doesn't. Okay, the fossils, most of them are marine creatures. There's some plants and algae in there, the insects and invertebrates, and if you can see this teeny tiny little black dotted line, those are what we, those are the animals, the reptiles, the dinosaurs, all the mammals, is that teeny tiny little dotted line. That's how many of those fossils we find, of the billions of fossils that are out there. Okay, most of them are marine. Okay, well, why is that? Remember we talked about the succession of the flood coming in, like 6 different waves that lines up with those mega sequences. Okay, the marine fossils were covered first, then as the flood progressive, the higher land animals, and then at the top you get the land animals and the mammals. Okay, so this is the geological column that has all of the different layers, and it's millions of years. But remember from last week, the lowest layers is from the early stages of the flood. Okay, and then it goes up. The next layers is the coastal animals, and then the higher creatures died late in the flood. That makes sense of the evidence. Okay, now they have what is called the Cambrian explosion, because down here, this is the Cambrian layer right here. And that's where fossils originally start showing up, is in that Cambrian layer is what they've named it. So they call it a Cambrian explosion. There's an explosion of animals for some reason. That's where they started. But this is their burial order. Don't forget that. The geological column is their burial order. That makes sense of the evidence. Okay? How do you know the age of the rocks? And this is how they date those fossils, because of the index fossils that are in them. Okay? Well, how do you date the fossils? Because of the age of the rocks they're in. And this is really, truly how they date these fossils. That's circular reasoning. And that just doesn't, that's not logical at all. Okay, here is a picture of some, these are called polystrate fossils. Okay, when I turn my head, my microphone. Okay, so these polystrate fossils right here, that's a real tree. Right there, and then another one right here. This is a layer, this is a layer, this is a layer. How did this tree get fossilized? Millions of years, millions of years, millions of years. And you can find these polystrate fossils all over the place, which are fossilized this way, and the layers go like this. That doesn't make sense if each layer is millions of years. Okay. Oh, time for a video.
Dead organisms usually don't last long. Scavengers and bacteria consume them quickly. Soft tissues rarely last more than days or weeks, and hard parts like bones or shells only a month or two. But the rocks of Earth contain billions and billions of fossils, and in many places, millions of fossils are exquisitely preserved, even soft parts. How could this be? To preserve a body, it needs to be put in a safe place. Extremely cold or dry places would protect them, but most organisms don't live in those conditions. There is another solution: rapid burial. If a body is sealed from oxygen and out of reach of burrowing animals, then it has a good chance of fossilizing intact. Rapid burial is uncommon today, but there's much evidence of massive burials in the past. Not only are many fossils well preserved, they're found amidst very fine sediment layers. Fine layers rarely last in the present because all sorts of animals are digging around in the mud and soil, searching for food. In just a few weeks or months, the original layers are destroyed. But in the fossil record, churned up sediments are rare. If these sediments were laid down rapidly, however, they'd prevent burrowers from doing their job. And there are thousands of feet of such layers in the fossil record all over the world. This suggests that moving water laid down mud and sand rapidly over a wide area, and the process lasted several months. A year-long global flood, as described in the Bible, is the best explanation we know for the well-preserved fossils and fine layering throughout the rocks of the Earth.
Whoops. Okay, so this is a schematic that you would see in a textbook. Up here at the top, they have, footprints that are left in the mud, the dinosaur dies, and then slowly the flesh rots away, and then eventually the water level comes up and covers him, and then sediments cover that, and then eventually erosion happens and they find the fossil. Well, that is not logical at all. You can tell that this dinosaur that died by the seashore, he's going to be eaten. Bacteria are going to, do their thing, and the bones are not going to be there. So this does not logically make sense. Okay? Oh, my clicker stopped working. Okay, so let's use some critical thinking, and this just can't happen. Okay? So rapid burial is the only thing that explains the actual fossil record that we see. Okay? This was the ichthyosaur that was having the baby, you can see, that I showed you last week. Rapid burial is the only way that this thing could have fossilized this quickly. Okay? Lots and lots of fish fossils eating dinner. That's what the fossil record shows. Okay? A school of fish. This does not fossilize like this if they all die at the same time and are laying on the beach and then they slowly get covered with sand and fossilize after millions of years of lots of heat and pressure and time. That's the story that we're taught. Okay? In the Grand Canyon, Dr. Steve Austin did all of this research, and there's these creatures called nautiloids. They're all swimming in the same direction, in the same layer, and there's billions of them. Okay, how does that happen unless that whole layer was laid down right away? It doesn't happen unless they were all buried in a catastrophic flood. Okay? Textbooks will tell you that these layers formed gradually. Grain by grain, they're falling down in a super placid sea, is what they'll say. And that's what we're taught, that slowly over time these things are buried. That's not the case at all. Okay, the coelacanth fish supposedly went extinct 65 million years ago. And in the textbooks, you'll see drawings of how this flipper, is turning into feet to walk out on land. And then they draw a creature like this and say this coelacanth, they called it old forelegs because these fins are turning into legs. Okay, because the evolutionary story goes, life starts in the ocean, and then it has to crawl out of the ocean. Okay, that's important. Later on, we're going to talk about how the mammals get back into the ocean. Okay. This is the coelacanth fish that they found. He's not extinct. 65 million years of living, he's still a fish. Okay, according to their model, this thing should have legs by now. You shouldn't actually see it. Yep, that is not going to work. Okay. So, sudden appearance and stasis. Remember those two things? These are fossils, okay? You know what they are because they have stayed the same for millions and millions and millions of years. This is what the fossil record shows. Okay, they call these living fossils. Well, there's tons of living fossils. Okay? Sudden appearance and stasis, they stay the same. It does not match up to their theory, so they should be changing their theory, but they can't because it's a worldview. Okay, birds fossilized, feathers, super intricate details have been fossilized. These trilobites, they say they have one of the most complex eye systems that they've ever studied. And they can study them because they're so well preserved. That bottom picture is the trilobite eye. Like great detail. And trilobites are in all these different layers. So for millions of years, they haven't changed. Sudden appearance and stasis. That's what the fossil record shows. Okay, arthropods. The details are amazing on these fossils. You can tell the grasshopper from the spider. Okay? So speaking of spiders, here's this guy, Meglioarachnia. Okay, this was found in China. This was the biggest spider fossil ever found. Okay, these fossil hunters, when they find fossils, they can be rich, they can be famous if they can find something that's new, unique, or a missing link. Okay? Well, they started doing some more study on this thing. They used fluorescence microscopy, and they realized this is just a crayfish, and they had painted the legs on it. Okay, this was not a new fossil. Okay, and this is just one of many frauds that are out there. Okay, so here we have Lucy is on the very far left, and then you have man. And this is everywhere in our society. Okay, so let's go through some of these. Here's a great video that shows about Lucy.
When it comes to so-called missing links between apes and humans, there's one that stands head and hairy shoulders above the rest. And I mean that figuratively because it was speculated to only be a little over 3 feet tall when alive. And I'm referring to none other than Australopithecus afarensis, my friend and yours, Lucy in the sky with diamonds. Well, that's where the name came from. But it's just plain Lucy to you and me, and it's got some splaining to do because it ain't all it's cracked up to be. I mean that literally. First of all, this highfalutin technical name simply means southern ape from the Afar region, which is about the only thing they say that's accurate when it comes to this supposed hirsute hominid, as all kinds of creative and fanciful things happen along the way to make Lucy into the ultimate missing link. But before I go there, let's just take a quick look at how Lucy is often depicted. Here you go, one right from a museum right there, another right from a textbook. Wow, look at her smiling and walking just like you and me. Now, did someone snap a photo of Lucy and the gang back then? I mean, is this how they found Lucy, walking around, waving at him with a cute little smirk? Of course not. So then how did this artist come up with this rendering? Well, who knows exactly. But let me tell you how it all started. Way back in 1974, paleoanthropologist Donald Johanson and his team discovered Lucy in the Afar region of Ethiopia. Or, more accurately, I should say, they discovered less than 30% of Lucy's fossilized bones. That's right, 70% of Lucy gone, not found. Well, wait a second then. What specific bones were found that convinced some scientists that Lucy walked upright? It must be at least the feet and the hips, right? Indeed, my friends, you're so right, you're so smart. So let's take a look at the feet and the hips. Now, the main evidence supporting the belief that this southern ape walked upright is that they found, now get this, human footprints in Tanzania, Africa in 1978. Now, you heard that right. 4 years after, and hundreds of miles away from where Lucy was found, they found human footprints, which of course means they must have been Lucy's. Huh? Not really convincing, especially when you consider the bones of Lucy that they did find did not include foot bones. What? Yeah, no foot bones, as in zero, zilch, nada, none, zippo. So if you don't have Lucy's foot bones, how do you know the human footprints hundreds of miles away were Lucy's? Well, maybe it's because they found other foot fossils they claim to be from Lucy's relatives. Only problem there is the toes were more curved than a chimpanzee's. That means the actual fossil evidence shows Lucy's family could not have made the human footprints. I don't know. Call us science deniers if that makes you feel better. But if the shoe fits, I mean, if the glove doesn't fit, you must. Nope. I mean, if the bones don't fit, well, whatever. Anyway, what about the hip? That's really going to prove Lucy walked upright like our rendering depicts, right? Well, you're going to love this part of the story, but before I go there, I got to throw 2 more facts at you for color and clarity. Fact 1, after 40 years of research, Swiss scientists discovered something very surprising about Lucy. She ain't a she. He's a he. Or like they might say in California, Lucy's a dude, bro. So, question. How in the world did the earlier, nearly infallible scientists who were proclaiming Lucy as the unmistakable, irrefutable missing link miss this? I mean, this was pre-2020, and everybody knew the difference between men and women back then. Oops, probably shouldn't have said that. The fact dose. After making this discovery, scientists suggested a new name for Lucy. They suggested Lucifer. I am not kidding. And quite honestly, it's fitting because this set of bones has been used to lie to more people than just about any other in recent decades. Now, back to the great story that I call the hip bone manipulator. DJ said these very words about Lucy's hip bone after he discovered it. Superficially, her hip resembled a chimpanzee's, which meant that Lucy couldn't possibly have walked like a modern human. Yeah, I know he said her, but that's before he knew she was a he. I found it very confusing. Anyway, if Lucifer's hips flared out like a chimp's, making it so that it couldn't walk upright, what happened to change the hips so that what you see in museums and publications look like human hips? Man, you guys asked the best questions, and here's the answer. Owen Lovejoy, an anthropologist, made a copy of the hip bones in plaster and then, and I quote, cut the damaged pieces out and put them back together the way they were before Lucy died. He did what now? Like I said, you're going to love this part of the story. He cut and put them back together. Now, how did he know that's the way the hip was before Lucy died? I mean, why did he take a hip that, quote, resembled a chimpanzee's and then rearrange, literally saw, cut, and reconstruct things to make it appear like a human hip? Well, that I'll leave for you to contemplate. But at least we now know that the foundation of the artist's rendering of AL-2881, nicknamed Lucy, aka Lucifer the ape-like beast, is completely unfounded, because there's no real evidence that he, she, it, whatever the preferred pronoun might be, walked upright. Probably shouldn't have said that either. Anyway, the point is, this manufactured missing link, this unfounded depiction of Lucifer walking upright and smiling, this suspicious reconstruction of the hip, this incomplete bag of bones with no feet, and this embarrassing misgendering mistake pretty much demonstrate the claim that Lucy is the real deal has been, humanly speaking, debunked. Adios.
Pretty incredible, isn't it? Okay, so there is, if you really want to see the Nova documentary of Lovejoy's like he's demolishing these bones. Well, it's a copy of it, but he's taking a Dremel tool and then he makes it look like a chimpanzee because he had to take it apart, cut it up, and it's unbelievable that they readily admit this. So here is the bones right here of Lucy that we see, and these are, just all of the different bones, 400 pieces, 30% of them are teeth, and this is the best evidence for human evolution, is Lucy. It's in all the museums around, okay? There's a bone up here that's still in museums today that they know for certain is a baboon, and it's still depicted as part of the skeleton. So here's a critical question moving forward. How much of the fossil was actually found and how much is the artist's imagination? Okay, keep that in mind. It's something we don't think about. Okay, you see some fossils and then you see the picture of the creature that the fossils came from. Well, these are chimps, okay, and I want you to notice their eyes. Okay, now here is how much of Lucy was found. Now remember, this is our chimpanzee relative, and this is the artist's rendition of it. Look at the eyes. They purposely put in the sclera, the white of the eye, to make it look more human. Okay, they make it kind of look like it's thinking. It's got its head turned, it's thinking about dinner or whatever. And they purposely do this to deceive you into believing that this is the missing link. Okay, these are the footprints that they found in Laetoli. Excuse me. And they are human footprints. They've done all of these analysis. And this picture on the left is a normal human footprint, and then this is it didn't come out real good on this projector. So they've compared them, and they are human footprints. Everybody agrees. They're exactly identical to human footprints. Remember, they did not find feet on these Lucy fossils, no feet. Okay, the feet that they found, the foot bones they found near these footprints were super curved like a chimpanzee, or even more curved than most chimpanzees. Okay, here's a great quote. If the tracks look like they were made by man, and if study after study repeatedly concludes that the tracks are indistinguishable from those of a human, then why are researchers still questioning their origin? The only reason is that these tracks are out of step with the evolutionary story, because humans should not have been around at this time. Okay, because humans didn't evolve yet. So that's why these footprints are so important to prove that they were made from Lucy. Okay, so that is the picture on the left. That is the real deal. Okay, that one is at the Creation Museum. This is in every other museum in the world, walking upright, because they have to get that creature to walk upright, which means they have to change the angle of the hip, because chimpanzees walk like this. Okay. Ardipithecus, this is called Artie. This is another one that, these are the fossil bones that were found, okay? They're in such poor condition that they're super, super crumbly. Some of them they couldn't even get out of the dirt, okay? So they make these digital reconstructions of what they think it should look like, okay? And so then after 14 reconstructions digitally, they finally find the pelvis that they wanted. because they want it to be like a human pelvis so the thing can be walking upright. Okay? So this is the digital reconstruction that they made. They also have to change what's called the foramen magnum, where the spinal cord comes into the skull, okay? Because it's different on humans and apes, because we walk upright, okay? Ours is in the middle of our skull. Chimpanzees walk like this, so it's more towards the back of the skull, okay? So they make a digital reconstruction of these bones until they can make it fit what they want it to look like. Okay, Piltdown Man. This is great. They found a piece of a human skull, an orangutan jawbone, orangutan teeth, and then they chemically treat all the bones that they found to make them look really, really old. Because they found the missing link. They could be famous. Maybe they could, financially gain from it. Okay, Piltdown Man. This is what was found. And here's the textbook picture of the guy running around. Okay, Homo habilis, he's like the next link. Okay, this is the fossil that was found, and that's what you come up with in the textbook to teach children that these bones made that creature. And you never ever think about it when you're in school. You're like, oh yeah, Homo habilis, that's what he looked like. Okay, Homo erectus, called Java Man because that's where they found him, on the island of Java. Okay, and he's the oldest hominid in that series of evolution that they've ever found. Okay, great, we found another missing link that's closer to us. Okay, let's take a look at these bones. Okay, that's how much was found. Okay, it was a human thigh bone, 2 orangutan teeth, a human tooth, and a gibbon skull, which is a kind of a monkey. And there he is, from those bones. Right next to those bones in textbooks, convincing children that this is human evolution. Okay, Nebraska Man, this was awesome. Okay, this is how much of the fossil was found. That's what they found. What does that look like? Looks like a tooth. Okay, and then the artist's imagination, he's got a whole family because of the tooth. And then you know what they found out later? They did some more analyzing of this fossil. It is a pig's tooth. Nebraska Man was a pig's tooth they found. Okay, but yet it's part of that series that, evolution happened. Okay, Neanderthal Man. Neanderthals are supposed to be our closest relative. Okay, so here's the fossils that they found. Well, now Neanderthals are actually humans. Okay? There's DNA evidence that they're humans. We have Neanderthal genes in us. Okay? They had tools, they had artwork, they buried their dead. They were humans. Okay? They were not a distant ancestor of, some ape. Okay? But they draw them like cavemen, all hunched over carrying spears, and maybe they lived in caves because people lived in where they could. Okay? Maybe these guys, were on the outskirts of town living in caves. Lots of people lived in caves back then. Okay? We already did this slide. Okay, so Neanderthals are humans. They're not part of the missing link at all. Okay, so this whole entire thing is a complete fraud. Intentional deception is what fraud is. These are not mistakes. These are intentionally being deceived to believe that this scenario happens, okay? The Grand Experiment is a great website, okay? Dr. Werner went around and he interviewed all of these different scientists that were dealing with fossils, okay? And 13 out of these 14 animals were fraudulent. Remember, that's intentional deception going on. This is not mistaking, oh, I thought it was a human bone, but it turned out to be a whale bone. It's not a mistake like that. It's intentional. Okay, so look up the Grand Experiment. There's great, or Dr. Werner. There's great interviews with him, and he talks more in detail about his adventure that he went on, and I think it took like 10 years, over 150 frauds he found. We're going to go over some of them. Okay, there's 3 different ways you can make an ape man. You can make the ape fossils look more human, maybe take a Dremel tool to it, like Dr. Lovejoy did to Lucy. Okay, you can make a human fossil more ape-like, Or you can just combine the two different kinds of fossils. That's it. The only way you can make an ape man. Okay, here's another deception that they use a lot. Does the Chihuahua evolve into the Great Dane? But that schematic going from really tiny to really big, because the geological column, think, really, really tiny stuff on the bottom, really, really big dinosaurs on the top. They do that to show a progression of evolution. Okay, let's take a look. Horse evolution. The small guys on the bottom and the big guys on the top. Okay, they found a fox-like creature, and then a few years later, some guy put it in line with the other skeletons that looked horse-like, and they created this story. Okay, these fossils from all of these different horse-kind skeletons, they're living next to each other. They're in the same layers. You never find them buried like one going up as a progression. You never find that. They're mixed together in the different layers, but nobody's ever told that. Okay. So they're forming this assumption of evolution, and then they use this to prove evolution. Circular reasoning. Okay. Drawn from the fossils found in many different parts of the world, nowhere does this succession occur in one location, ever, and at all. Okay, lots of them are found at the same time. Okay, evolution of the horse in this picture, small to big, it's a complete fraud. Okay, let's look at another one. Whales do the same thing. On the top, you see the little tiny guy, and then on the bottom, the giant whale. Surely this happened. This is 2022. This is a exhibit to say, come look at our new exhibit of whale evolution in the museums. Take your kids here. Okay? This top one is called Pakicetus because it was, in the Pakistan region. How much of the fossil was found? The gray area was found on this creature initially. Okay? How much is the artist's imagination? Remember I told you that evolutionary story, everything started out in the ocean, single-celled, nothing turned into everything we see. They have to get it to crawl out of the ocean. Well, now, how do we get mammals in the ocean? Okay, let's get them back into the ocean. So now they have a story. They found this fossil. It's a wolf-like creature. And then they draw pictures of it getting back into the ocean. Okay, and he's at the top of the evolutionary scheme to get mammals back into the ocean. Okay, it was a wolf-like animal because later they found more bones of it. Here's a great video talking about all of the different whale evolution.
In 1859, Darwin speculated that bears evolved into whales. But does this story hold water? Secular scientists support Darwin's hunch with two main arguments. One, fossils, and two, useless features, also known as vestigial features. They claim that fossils show a clear evolutionary progression from land mammals to whales. But many of these fossils are incomplete. Take the famous fossil Pakicetus. Scientists first found an incomplete skull, and it didn't even have a body. Later, a more complete Pakicetus discovery revealed perfectly normal legs. Pakicetus lived on land. Or Rhodocetus. At first, with only one head, spine, and a few other bones, secular scientists imagine it had front flippers and a whale tail. But just like Pakicetus, later discoveries revealed that it was just a land-dwelling mammal. Sadly, some museum illustrations still show whale tails on Rhodocetus. Without Pakicetus or Rhodocetus, the main missing links vanish from whale evolution. So, we have whale kinds or land mammals, but nothing in between. Secular scientists often point to vestigial features as evidence for evolution. They assumed that certain whale hip bones were useless legs left over from land mammals evolving into whales. Come to find out, those bones play a pivotal role in helping whales reproduce. They aren't useless at all. The most complete scientific evidence refutes Darwin's hunch. Instead of transitional fossils and useless features, we find fully formed creatures according to their created kinds.
Okay, so whale evolution as you see it, it's complete fraud. Okay, they add the blowholes on these fossils. And so the grand experiment goes through and interviews them. And so if you can find those videos, watch them. It's great listening to these scientists say, well, the blowhole wasn't there, but we just assumed it was because that's, an evolutionary link to whales. Like, what? So they're not following the exact science, okay? So let's move on. Archaeopteryx, we've all heard of this guy. This is a bird, okay? They found the fossil, but remember, they think in their evolutionary story, they have to get these creatures to fly, so dinosaurs turned into birds, okay? Well, so Archaeopteryx comes along, and they're trying to convince people this was a dinosaur turning into a bird, okay? Well, let's take a look at him, okay? The feathers are fully formed. They're identical to modern birds. They have been found, these birds have been found millions of years older than this Archaeopteryx, according to their theory and their time scale. There's not one transition of feather to scale. They're either feathers or scales, okay? You cannot have a feather turn into a scale or a scale turn into a feather. Okay, there's DNA evidence now that shows that. They're two completely different things. The way they're formed, completely different. Okay, for a reptile to change into a bird, the only thing that we're taught is that feathers have to come from scales. You also have to hollow out the bones. You have to change the way they breathe. You have to change absolutely everything about the creature to get from a reptile into a bird, not just the feathers. Okay, you can't add feathers to a reptile and make it fly or breathe or anything else. Okay, so Archaeopteryx, he had claws on his wings. Well, so does an ostrich, and nobody thinks an ostrich is a reptile. Okay. This Archaeopteryx didn't have a keel, which is used for flying. Well, the cassowary bird, nobody thinks is a reptile, and he doesn't have a keel either. He had an unfused backbone and a bony tail. Well, so does a penguin. And nobody thinks a penguin is a reptile, it's a bird. Okay, so Archaeopteryx is a bird. Okay, now let's look at Archaeoraptor over here on the right. Okay, because he is the missing link. In 1999, they were very excited. They actually found the missing link because Archaeopteryx was just, not good enough. Okay, so here's the fossil they found. Over on the left, you can see the creature, and then the tail comes all the way over to the right. Okay, let's take a look at this guy. All right, it was two separate fossils that they glued together. Okay, the bird and the reptile. They glued them together. The fossil hunters that found him admitted this. Yep, we glued it together because we wanted to find the missing link. And they sold it, and it was publicized. Did they ever retract that on headline news? No. Archaeoraptor is the missing link. It's a fraud. Okay? Archaeoraptor, reptiles evolved into birds millions of years ago. That's a lie. It's being taught to children right now. Archaeoraptor's the missing link? No, he's not. He was a complete fraud. Scales turn into feathers. Given enough time, give it millions of years, and a scale can turn into feathers. That's a lie. Okay, so Archaeopteryx is a bird. Archaeoraptor is a fraud. Intentional deception is what that is. Okay, we are going to real quickly move on to radiometric dating, because I know that's a topic people want. Whoops.
Nearly every textbook in Science magazine teaches that the Earth is billions of years old, and the primary dating method used for determining this is what is called radioisotope dating, or radiometric dating. Now, this is a reliable method for measuring absolute ages of rocks and the age of the Earth, right? First off, many scientists now regard the age of the Earth to be between 4.55 and 4.6 billion years old. Okay, so if this method is reliable and accurate, why the 50 million year discrepancy? That seems like a lot, but let's get into some details here and see what's going on. Keep in mind that there's all kinds of scientific jargon on this topic, and so we'll just present a very straightforward, simplified version of the process. Radiometric dating is the process of estimating the ages of rocks based on the decay of radioactive elements in them. Basically, there are certain kinds of atoms in nature that are unstable and spontaneously decay into other kinds of atoms. For instance, uranium will radioactively decay through a series of steps until it becomes the stable element called lead. The original element is called the parent element, and the end result is called the daughter element. Radioisotope dating is commonly used to date igneous rocks, rocks which formed when hot molten material cooled and solidified. The dating clock started when the rock cooled. During the molten state, it is assumed that the intense heat forced any gaseous daughter elements to escape. It is assumed that once the rock cooled, no more atoms escaped, and any daughter element now found in the rock is a result of radioactive decay since that rock formed. The decay rate is measured in terms of half-life. That is the length of time it takes half of the remaining atoms of a radioactive parent element to decay. Now, of course, that can be measured in a laboratory, and it is assumed that since we know the decay rate, we can calculate backwards and come up with the age of the rock. But is that all there is to it? Here's where it gets tricky. It's true we can measure a decay rate using observational science, but there's another kind of science that is required to accurately calculate dates for rocks, and that is what we call historical science. Historical science deals with the things in the past, and therefore it cannot be repeated and tested. Dating methods require both types of science, because in order to get accurate rock dates, one would have to accurately know both the decay rate and the initial conditions of the rock sample, right? Since radioisotope dating uses both types of science, we can't directly measure the ages of rocks. There are assumptions involved. For instance, how do we know what the initial conditions were in the rock sample? How do we know the amounts of parent or daughter elements now in that sample haven't been altered by other processes in the past? How does someone know the decay rate has remained constant since the rock formed? The answer is they don't. Let's simplify here and talk about a typical hourglass. Let's say you walk into a room and you see an hourglass with sand at the top and sand at the bottom, and some sand sprinkling from the top chamber to the bottom. Well, observational science would allow us to see and measure the sand, and then calculate how long the hourglass has been running, right? We could make our sand measurements and then calculate when the hourglass was turned over, right? Well, those calculations could be wrong, because we may have failed to consider some major assumptions, like, was there any sand at the bottom when the hourglass was turned over? Has any sand been added or taken out of the hourglass? Has the sand always been falling at a constant rate? Since we did not observe the initial conditions when the hourglass started, and we haven't been watching the sand all the time since then, we must make assumptions. All three of those assumptions can affect our time calculations. Now, of course, there's more to understanding all of this, but enough said.
Did you guys see my hourglass up here? So there's critical assumptions. We'll get to those in a second. But real quick, the periodic table from chemistry talks about, this is what they're talking about, how things decay into other things. Okay, carbon and nitrogen, potassium, argon, these are some key ones that they do. But the numbers on the chart, that is, just to be a little sciencey, that is the number of protons. Remember, there's protons, neutrons, and electrons. Let's ignore the electrons. The proton number is what the thing is. So carbon is 6 protons. So anytime you have 6 protons, you're a carbon. It doesn't matter how many neutrons you have. It likes to have the same number. So it likes to have 6 neutrons. So that would be 6 plus 6 is 12. Okay? Carbon 14 has 8 neutrons. 6 plus 8 is 14. Carbon 14, that's all. It just has a few extra neutrons, and it doesn't like it. It wants to be stable. So it will decay and get back to the 12, 6 and 6. That's what it likes. And these same ones go for potassium, argon, and uranium, lead. Okay? A half-life is the amount of time. So like the money in the jar is the carbon 14. In 5,730 years, you're only going to have half the amount, okay? The rest of it kind of turns into nitrogen, okay? Because as it's losing chemically, as it's losing those neutrons, it is turning into, it will have 7 protons now, which 7 is nitrogen, okay? You don't have to know all the details. Okay, carbon 14, this is how it's produced. Okay, cosmic rays come in and basically think about the cosmic rays coming in, smashing into the nitrogen, and it creates the carbon 14 because nitrogen is 7 protons. So one of those protons gets turned into a neutron. So now it only has 6 protons, so it's a carbon. And then through the process, it picks up the 8 neutrons. Okay, you don't need to know that detail. But this is how it's produced from the cosmic rays smashing into the atmosphere. And then it combines with oxygen to create CO2. Okay, we breathe it, we eat it, plants breathe it and eat it, we eat the plants. That's how we get carbon-14 in us. We all have carbon-14 in us. And it is radioactively decaying back into nitrogen. When you die, you stop eating and breathing. And that's how they do the calculations. Okay? So radiometric dating, radiocarbon dating, the half-lives get to such a small amount that anything after 50,000 years has no detectable carbon-14 in it anymore. So if you're at a museum and they say carbon-14 has dated this to 100 million years, it is not possible. Again, that would be a fraud. That is intentional deception. Because after 50,000 years, there's none. There's no carbon-14 detectable anymore. Okay? So it cannot. Okay, so let's think about what could affect this. The cosmic rays hitting the Earth's atmosphere. Have they always been the same? Because that would definitely affect the amount of carbon-14 in our environment. What about the Earth's magnetic field? If that was stronger, maybe it kept the cosmic rays out. Potentially, right? What about solar activity? Could that affect the rays coming in? Absolutely. Okay, what about a worldwide catastrophic flood? That would probably affect things. There's no more plants. That would probably affect the carbon-14 levels. Okay, so the assumptions is that the amount of carbon-14 in the atmosphere has always been constant, that carbon-14 is in equilibrium, meaning it's the same, coming in and going out. Okay, they've done calculations, and at 30,000 years, we will be at equilibrium, the carbon-14 in our environment. Is it at equilibrium? No. So the Earth is not even 30,000 years old. Just because of this, we can see that. Okay? The decay rate, we don't know it's always been constant. We have no idea. There's no way science can know that. That would be historical information. Okay, so let's just see if it's a valid method. Let's just test the method. Okay, kind of like the Darwinian theory versus the fossil record, what we find. Let's test it. Okay, so they tested a living snail shell. He's alive today. He's 27,000 years old. Let's just try to validate it again. Let's test a living mollusk shell, because that's what they find is in the fossil record is tons and tons of sea creatures, right? He's 2,300 years old. Okay, let's kill a seal and test it. It's 1,300 years old, carbon-14 dating. We're just trying to validate this method to see if it's valid. Okay, let's test a mammoth. Well, let's test part of it. It's 29,000 years old. Another part of it was 44,000 years old. Because it would be a really, really cool thing if we could come up with a method of dating to let us know how old these things are. So let's just try to validate it. Okay? They found a skull in Germany, a human skull. Let's date it. Oh, he's only 20, he's 27,000 years old. 2005, they found this. The man died in 1750. They later discovered he was not 27,000 years old. They're just trying to validate this method. There's carbon-14 in dinosaur bones. Okay? They never test dinosaur bones for carbon-14 because there shouldn't be any. They're 65 million years old. Okay? Diamonds are millions of years old. There shouldn't be any carbon-14 in them anymore. It should have all decayed back. There is carbon-14 in dinosaur bones, in diamonds, okay? Coal samples from 10 different locations. Coal, millions and millions of years old. They all have carbon-14 in them, all of them. Okay? So remember the assumptions. You have to know the parent element and the daughter element. Oh, look, my hourglass is up. We must be done. Did you guys see me turn that over? No. Okay? You don't know what the initial conditions are. You don't know at the beginning how much of the parent and how much of the daughter element was there. Was there a constant decay rate? Did you see me shake the rest of the sand out? Because it got stuck up here. I had to shake the rest out every time. I turned it over. An hour later, there's still some left in there, actually. Probably humidity got in there and got stuck. Okay? You don't know that decay rate's been the same. Okay? You don't know I can take that out and put some more sand in there. You don't know that. Okay? These are assumptions in all radiometric dating, not carbon-14, but all radiometric dating. Okay? 3 critical assumptions. None of these can be observed, measured, or tested. Okay? Radiometric dating. Okay? Let's take a look at not carbon-14, but the other methods where they're testing inorganic material like rock. Okay? Mount St. Helens, potassium decays into argon. Okay? The whole rock, Mount St. Helens exploded in 1980. Great experiment. Let's go test these rocks. So they send them in to a secular lab, and they take different kinds of rocks, and they're getting different ages. Why the discrepancy? All of these rocks were created when Mount St. Helens exploded in 1980. So 1986, 6 years later, these rocks should be 6 years old, right? Radiometric dating, which is what evolution in millions of years relies on, convinces people of. It's not validated. You cannot validate this method. Here's an explosion that happened in 1954 over in New Zealand. Okay? The lava flows tested all 3 different, the same lava flow. They know it exploded in 1954. Radiometric dating showed all of these different dates. Is this a valid scientific method of dating things? No, but because we don't understand as lay people how the chemistry and all of that works, we think, oh, well, they've dated it to 133 million years old. Well, then the same lava is dated at 4 billion years old. Okay? The method is not validated. Here's the Grand Canyon. They used 3 different methods on the same rock. Okay? Little different. Okay? All of these different methods, potassium going to argon, rubidium going to strontium, they used all of those different methods. They got incredible different ages. My is millions of years and By is billions of years. All right? If these radioisotope clocks and this dating method is accurate, every single clock should give the same age. It's the same rock. Okay? This is radiometric dating, intentional deception. It's a fraud. And this is what they use to keep evolution in millions of years going. Okay, radiometric dating. You know the age of the sample, it doesn't work. So why, when you have a sample of something that you don't know the age of, are you assuming that it works? It doesn't. It does not work. Radiometric dating, we tried to validate it. It doesn't work, okay? So the fossil record shows rapid burial in a catastrophe, okay, as seen from the fossils, the actual fossil record. The order of the fossils is due to the order of the way they were buried and how they were sorted out in the flood. Okay, there's fossil graveyards with marine and land creatures all jumbled up together. Okay, remember sudden appearance and stasis. Those are the 2 things everyone agrees on that the fossil record shows. Okay, this is all evidence of design by God, just like the Bible says. Okay, so the fossil record confirms that we had a worldwide flood. It confirms the flood and creation. The fossil record confirms both of those. Remember, evolution in millions of years, they're trying to get rid of creation with the millions of years, the 6 days of creation, they're trying to get rid of that. And they're trying to get rid of the flood. Those are really the 2 things that are under attack. Okay? So just remember, fossils actually show a worldwide catastrophic flood. Radiometric dating, carbon-14 dated, those methods cannot be verified, ever. You can always ask somebody, do you know of an instance where a known age of something was radiometrically dated correctly? The answer is no, never, not once. Can't happen. It's not that detailed of a science. Radiometric dating does not work. It's not valid. Okay. Okay. We made it through everything very fast. So